Well, good morning, everyone, or if you're watching this later, whatever time of day it is. Thanks always for joining us. I had a whole topic I was almost prepared to go with this week, and I changed my mind because I feel like we're all dealing perhaps with, I think we're all dealing with feelings of anger or fear, and certainly I think fatigue from living in these totally different times. So maybe think about all of those things and our faith. So that's kind of where we're going to go today. It's a little bit more free-formy than usual. I wanted to start by referring to some words we're going to hear in the second reading this coming Sunday, words that St. Paul wrote to the Romans. He wrote, "Brothers and sisters, we know that all things work for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose." And I think it's a good reminder that all things work for good, as the words say themselves, for those who love God. Does that mean that we are never going to encounter a problem, face a challenge, be burdened? No, because our lives with Christ are lives that are built on carrying the cross, dying, and rising again and again and again. So the good news is, of course, all will be well. The challenging part of that is it might not be according to our own specific needs or timetable, which frankly I find very frustrating sometimes. So dealing with primarily COVID, I think, of course, that all of our lives changed. I counted. It was 122 days ago that our New York pause began, our stay-at-home order. So that's a long time. It's a very long time. And I was listening to a podcast this morning, and the person said they can't even really remember a lot of like their manner of being prior to this. And I was like, it's true. And then I saw like a little video thing that had all these clips from January forward, basically a commentary on the challenges of 2020. And I was like, wow, I forgot that happened. Or, oh my gosh, I completely don't even remember that. So I think we've all had a lot on our minds. It's a long journey, and it's not ending yet. So these talks sort of began back then. I think we started in late March, early April. I can't even remember that. As a sort of manner of reflection and encouragement. And trust me, I'm talking to myself, and I think we all need one another's prayers. So I thought, well, let's kind of go back to the beginning for a minute. So here we are. We made it through those days, the last weeks of Lent, and into Easter Sunday and the Easter season. Spring came, and every garden and nursery center sold out of plants at a rate unknown to them because we're all gardening because we're staying home. And I think we've tried to retain our faith and our good cheer, but that fatigue really sets in. I know I've been feeling it more. And regardless of how we experience it, it's very real. And this sort of like, I don't know, for me, it's like this bone-tired exhaustion. The weight that just sits upon us in these times. And that sometimes puts me into like a little bit of a depression place, which is a place I tend to think of in more winter time for me. But so I think we all have trying to navigate. Add to this all of our individual lives. We all have issues, some worse than others. There's death, there's sickness, there's sorrow, there's every kind of thing on top of all of the COVID stuff. So that is also exhausting. And sometimes it might feel like God is silent to us because we're praying and praying about things and they don't always come to an end. But that's where that God's time and our time thing is important to remember. To that end, I actually have a book called When God is Silent. Of course I have a book. Somebody sent this book to me, my friend Michelle, who was going to make it into my other topic I had worked on. Funny that. Anyway, I think sometimes we all have the tendency when someone's talking to us about like what their burden is to want to explain to them, like say, oh, this or that. In fact, I'm kind of doing that now, aren't I, in a sense? But I reread this passage from this wonderful book, and it says, it talks about how Job actually at times prefers God's silence to the explanations of his friends. Barbara Brown Taylor is an Episcopal priest. She writes, in their ministerial anxiety, they are like flies buzzing around him on his dung heap. If they would just shut up, he could take his case to the source. So I think that's something, I know I am prone to giving advice that no one has asked for, and I'm always trying to remind myself not to do it. And even if somebody asks me for it, I need to be mindful of how I do that. And so I certainly don't know everything, far from it. So it's a kind of like finding that balance. So perhaps we have someone around us that we're talking to that we need to think about how we talk to them or how we listen or how we leave them alone. And then we need to think about how we manage that with people. Sometimes I just smile, and even though inside I feel kind of angry or anxious. But those are just important things to think about. Like, what do we do? Sometimes we just want to talk about our anxiety, at least I do, without having someone tell me how to fix it. And I noticed that a friend of mine on her Facebook said, blah, 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 blah. That's something that was on her mind. And she said, I'm simply stating this. Thanks in advance for not telling me how you would fix it. You know, and she just wanted to express her frustration. So, you know, we have all these things coming at us, and it's hard. We live in this time when so much information does come at us, even when there's not as much significant activity. I remember in 2005, I was working in the media business, and I got a statistic given to me in a meeting, and it blew my mind. It said, and this was in 2005, when we spent a lot less time online, if we were even online at all. It says the average person in the United States got more mail in a week than a generation prior would have gotten in their entire lifetime. That's mind-blowing. So, you know, that was in 2005. 15 years later, we are just like, think of being pelted constantly with information. And that's hard. You know, we might feel like we need to have the TV on or be reading social media or something, but sometimes we have to give ourselves a little space from that. So we feel overwhelmed and we don't know what to do. And that causes our fatigue and our anger to increase. So perhaps that's just an invitation to spend more quiet time and time with God. You know, it's hard to be, it's not hard, start over. It is difficult at this point in time because we're all frustrated, likely frustrated about something. The virus is certainly a big topic. Politics in general is a big topic. And I think it causes us to fight with one another. Now, who do we think wants us to fight with one another? Not Jesus. Jesus wants us to be one in him. I came so that all might be one. On the other hand, the evil one the devil. The word devil, it comes from diabolical. Diabolical comes from division. Is certainly well vested in us fighting with one another. So I think that's important to remember, and it's not like we should be looking around for some, creature that looks like the devil, but to remember that when we're fighting, it's really sometimes yielding to evil. So if you don't like somebody else's opinion, probably the best thing to do is move on from it. I know I can't always do that, although I've gotten a lot better at it. I wrote an article. It was in a magazine. It was on a website. Hasn't been printed yet. Last week, and the article generated a lot of commentary online. Most of it negative. Well, there was positive, but there was a lot of negative comments about it, because I think there's misunderstanding about the topic. And so I was in the interesting position of being pelted with the rocks and garbage of internet commentary from strangers, telling me I didn't know what I was talking about, or that I was wrong about a topic that I happen to have a good deal of knowledge about, because it was something I was a part of. So I had to laugh, and I was glad I could laugh. I think of other times in my life I might have seen those comments and felt the need to go, mano a mano right back at them. So, this kind of fighting, and it's like a drug a little bit, or like, we want to go have a fight, and because we want to be right. And, that really takes away from our life of faith. So we have fear, we have frustration, we have fury, and then we have our faith. So, it makes me, I have to question myself all the time, because, there's this old thing from the internet, and it's like a little stick figure typing at a computer, and then you see like a cartoon bubble off to the side that says, "Are you ever coming to bed?" And then the person at the computer says, "I can't, someone is wrong on the internet." And I think of that cartoon all the time, because that's basically all of our lives many times, because we want to argue with someone on the internet or someone in the news or something like this. I'm looking for something in another book here. Where is it? Aha. So sometimes we have to live with the darkness. This book is called Hope Against Darkness, The Transforming Vision of St. Francis in an Age of Anxiety, and it's written by Richard Rohr and John Feister. Sometimes people hear Richard Rohr's name and they're like, "Oh, Father Richard Rohr, yay." And other people are like, talk about opinions, "Father Richard Rohr, nay." Regardless of that, this is whatever you think of him or don't even know who he is, this is a wonderful book. And, in this one chapter at the end, it's talking about this spiritual transformation as a movement from darkness to light. And I think that's sometimes what we're doing. Someone is wrong on the internet. We think they've fallen under the sway of evil. We get angry. And we want to turn on the light for them, right? And so often, this is like, at least we think it is, like, I'm going to help them see God, or grow in their faith, or make better choices. And that's because we want to eradicate the darkness. And certainly, we don't want to increase the darkness. But what this is talking about here is that we have to integrate the darkness and light. And how do we do that in these very challenging times? And it's about that balance, because we know that day and night exist, darkness and light, good and evil. And I think we're tempted, understandably, to want to drive out all evil, eradicate all darkness. Sometimes we have to learn how to live in faith with the balance of those two things. I have spent the past many decades trying to figure that out. I am not sure I have a clue yet, but I still think that there's something to it. Because when we want to just just want to drive away the darkness, I forget that sometimes there's a lesson in it, and that's the cross, right? Jesus dies. Jesus descends into hell. Jesus rises again. And that's, I think, what we're asked to do. So if you have an answer of how to do this, please get in touch with me. It's just hard, and it really drags us down. Our fear pushes us away from one another, whether we're I'm not going to associate with that person because they are this or they think that. It could push us away like, oh, the virus might make you think I'm never leaving my house again. And therefore we end up cutting ourselves off in other ways. It drags us down, it separates us, and then that separates us from God, right? Because God is alive in all of us, and we need one another. So that got me to the point of saying, okay, well, all this stuff may be true, but what are some ways that we might, work against that? These are just my ideas. You may have some. Put them in the comments or send them to me in a note or an email or something. I've said so many of these things before, and I'll continue to say them again. One thing is to pray. As we I've said before, it doesn't have to be elaborate. If you don't want to take on some more complicated tasks like learning how to pray the Liturgy of the Hours, the monastic prayers, multiple times a day, that's a form of prayer which I love, and yet I have never been able to ever keep up with. And then you can do something else, prayer, say a rosary, say one decade of the rosary, say them all, it doesn't matter. Sometimes we feel like if you start it, you have to finish it. You could pray one decade now and maybe one later, or not at all. Isn't it better to just have, at least a little bit of it done? Maybe we can just sit at our window, on our deck, in our garden, watch the birds, look at the flowers, all the small creatures that are hopefully not eating all the things in your garden. Butterflies. There's so much to see. I was in line. Every now and then I drag myself down to Trader Joe's on Wolf Road. And you always have to wait in this line. It usually moves pretty quickly. So I'm standing there in the line, and I'm looking up at the sky. And right over Wolf Road at 9 o'clock on a Friday morning, a bald eagle flew over. I was like, look, it's a bird, it's a plane. No, just the wonder and the awe of seeing that. So nature speaks to me. Maybe something else speaks to you, and find what that is. Have a conversation with God or with Mary. You can have it out loud if you're alone. Have it silently. Write in a journal. Is there a saint you'd like to have a conversation with? Or a loved one who has gone home to God? I talk to my mama all the time. She's been gone since 1991. But for me, that's part of a prayer. I'm not praying to her. She's not God. But I can talk to her, and that is part of my prayer. We also can let God know that we're angry and frustrated in our prayer, by the way. Again, there was a reference to Job earlier. That Job is always a good resource at times like this. Maybe make a list of things that are really upsetting you. And if you have a fire pit, take that list out one night and burn it as you pray. Perhaps the best prayer is to just be still. The words of the psalm, be still and know that I am God. Just communicating with God. Make time. Another idea is to make time for what I call the 2 S's, silence and sleep. We need plenty of both. Silence can be daunting, but it's really restorative if you can find a practice to it. Sit quietly, say, be still, and know that I am God, perhaps over and over. in your heart, and it's like inviting yourself into a deep silence with God. Sleep can go with silence and with prayer. I used to go to Regina Loudis Monastery in Bethlehem, Connecticut. It's a very famous Benedictine women's monastery. The actress Dolores Hart, who over 50 years ago left Hollywood to become a cloistered nun there. There's a very famous movie in the 40s or late 40s, I think, early 50s, no, probably 50s, called Come to the Stable, which is about the founding of that monastery. But this is about 30 years ago. I used to go there on a very regular basis, and they had this little old chapel. It was old, it was kind of dark, and the Vespers, we would go for Vespers, and Vespers were in Latin. And in this small, dark chapel, this intonation, this prayer, I would always fall asleep. I would feel terrible. I would just nod off. And I would say to my friends, I can't believe I slept. And then one of them said to me, well, that is a form of prayer. Leading me to now tell you that I often say, my favorite form of contemplative prayer is sleep. But honestly, we do need sleep. We do need rest. It's when God does the knitting for us in a way. We're truly still. And it's important, health-wise and mental health-wise and spiritually. We have to choose peace. I think that is a difficult thing to do. I'm kind of a natural fighter, although I'm more mellow in my golden years here. I'm not a physical fighter, but I'll fight with people. I didn't think that calming down was a choice I could make. I'd be like, this is who I am. This is how God made me. Well, guess what? I was wrong. So a way to be peace is to choose peace and then to feel peace. It's not easy. And it does not like, okay, well, that's done. It's a constant challenge. So, if you were in the middle of a storm on a lake in a little rowboat, if you stood up, the boat would start, moving all over. Now, it's going to be moving all over anyway, but if you are calm in the boat and imagine Jesus there with you, you've got your focus in the right place. And that's how I look at some of my anger when I want to pick a fight with someone. The other thing is like sometimes we're angry and we want to just walk away. Be like, I'm done. Maybe we need to do that for a time out, but the important thing is sometimes to be present. See what that anger is telling us so that when we choose peace, we also choose healing and restoration and reconciliation as a part of that. And that we don't want to carry around all that bitterness. And ultimately, none of this is like a one and done activity. We're going to see news, we're going to see emails that get forwarded to us, we're going to see things on Facebook or Twitter, from all kinds of sources. Many of these things are literally created to make people angry. Oftentimes they're not true. That has nothing to do with one side or another. Things are meant to stir us up. There's a lot of competition to get our attention. And people, organizations, companies will go to great lengths to get that. So keeping that focus on God is kind of our life's work. And we have to keep choosing this over and over and over again. In the Benedictine rule, the basic monastic rule that has been in the church since the 6th century says, always we begin again. Every day we start over and over and over. And God is waiting for us every day to start over. So it's the middle of summer. Could be, time to hit refresh. Take a step back, see where you end up. Our differences will always be with us, our anger, our fear, all these things. But our faith is the most important thing that will be with us. And I think if we all, just take a step back, that way we maybe can find a better way forward, or at least a way forward that does not imprison us in all of the feelings of fear, fury, and frustration. I was going to read this poem, but I'm gone on far too long. It's on Facebook. Did you post it already, Christine? Nope. Well, maybe she'll post it on our page because it's a really good poem from a great woman of faith named Sarah Hart. And it's just a reminder that we have to just share this with God and with one another, and then continue to move together, one body, ever hopeful in Christ, even in the darkest days. We can do this. Okay? Thank you.